Hi, everyone. Welcome. On behalf of the Seattle Asian American Film Festival, I would like to welcome some of the filmmakers from our Sweet and Salty film program. Jumping back into introductions, so please feel free to share your name, the film you worked on, where you're calling in from, and if you are willing to just jump in, that's great. And also feel free to kind of like ask each other questions or really speak up at any point during our time together. And I can start. My name is Yaoyao. I am the volunteer manager at SAAFF, and I'm calling in from Seattle. And would anyone like to go next?
Hi, my name's Jennifer, and I'm calling in from Canada, on Toronto, Canada. And my film is Sigwa Mimi, or Watermelon Secrets.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashrita Chavali. I'm calling in from the Bay Area, and my film is A Bowl Full of Love.
I can go. Hi, I'm Carrie. I go by she, her. I'm the director producer of No Place Like Kasama, and I'm calling in from Chicago.
Hi, I'm Joella. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of Kodo The Last Service, and I'm calling from Vancouver, British Columbia.
I guess I'll go next. Hello, I'm Amanda Anman Wong, and I'm the director of 100 Joys. I use both she, her, and they, them pronouns. And I am also calling from Toronto, Canada. And Jennifer and I also have a very similar look going on. We're both got like yellow. We got our yellow outfits on. It's very cold today, so I see why you made the same wardrobe choice there, like a warm sweater kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Hey everyone, this is Law. I'm the director of Leftovers, and I am in snowy New York City right now.
Sounds like we got a lot of cold climates going on. Very cool. And so I'll just get into some prepared questions, but, like I said before, please feel free to jump in, interject, ask each other questions, very open space. And additionally, feel free to respond in any order that you like. I think everyone is fairly courteous with the Zoom unmuting and things like that, but I know we have a big group, so recognizing that may come up. So the first is just what inspired you to make your film, or how did you get involved in this project?
I can go first. So I came up with this idea during quarantine, so like around March when everything started shutting down. Like my family was kind of like all over the place. We were all taking meals at separate times because school and work and stuff like that. But with quarantine, like we got back to having like family meals again. And during that time, I kind of realized that just being able to sit down and like have a meal together was it helped a lot towards like bringing us together. And like once quarantine hit, we were also able to like cook together, and that meant a lot because that was a good time for us to like catch up. And sometimes that was the only time like throughout the day that we would see each other. So just having that moment and that experience was really important to me. And so I got to thinking, and I realized that there could be people around the world who may not like be able to connect with loved ones, but who use cooking and family recipes in order to maintain that bond. So that's why I made the project.
Yeah, that's really touching. I can definitely relate to food being very heartwarming. And so my film was also kind of stems from that experience, not necessarily cooking, but definitely shopping with my grandma and my parents. I actually came up with this idea when I was looking through some old videos I took. And I had this video of my friend and I going to a grocery store. This was like years ago before the pandemic. And she picked up the watermelon and she's like, hey, when your parents go like they slap the watermelon, like, whoa. And then we couldn't stop laughing because we just thought it was so funny, but we didn't really understand like what they were listening for. So out of that little gag, I decided to make a film about it.
I can hop in next. Oh, no, you go ahead.
I just wanted to say that that is so adorable, and I love that so much. Like, and your film looks really, really cute too. Um, uh, I guess I should introduce myself and the film and how that started. Well, so 100 Joys is, as you can see here, is taken from the name of this street, Broadview Avenue in Toronto. That it's like, if it's directly translated, it's like 100 Joys Gathering Street. So that's why it's called 100 Joys, and it's about East Chinatown here in Toronto. We're very lucky to have two different Chinatowns. One is the bigger one at Dundas and Spadina. It's the West Chinatown, and there's a smaller little sibling, as they like to affectionately call it, at East Chinatown. And it kind of occurred because there was an original Chinatown, but then they decided to build a city hall there in the 70s, and so the business owners there got displaced and had to move elsewhere, and the people who couldn't afford to move to the bigger Chinatown started their own place in East Chinatown, which started just around I think the first shop was like a butcher shop, Charlie's Meat, and then that kind of, the community kind of grew around there. And so I guess, in light of our program of sweet and salty, 100 Joys like looks at people who live there and also some business owners who are currently there, and ask them about sort of, their journey, their hopes for the future, and, sort of to show that tenacity of that neighborhood, how it came to be, and the sort of intimacy and the tight-knit like neighborhoodness of it all. But yeah, going back to the sweet and salty, there's one store that we follow, Wong's Ice Cream. Ice cream is sweet. And then we've got another store, Walk and Roast Chinese Barbecue, and that's the salty.
Perfect alignment there.
I'll definitely have to check those out. I haven't been to Toronto downtown in a while, but those places sound really tasty.
Yeah, maybe we can go together. I'll take you. But Wong's Ice Cream is closed now. It's closed down since the film. So I'm sorry to take up for that sad news, but I'll take you to the other places. There's a lot of awesome places. But Carrie, please go. I totally interrupted you there when you started going.
No worries. I think this is the first shorts program that I think my doc has been part of that's like really explicitly based around food. So it's really interesting sitting in this Q&A and hearing how everyone's inspiration is from like childhood and like how they grew up and how food kind of plays a big part to it. So just a quick summary, my film follows two chefs right before the pandemic as they opened their dream restaurant basically, and like 2 or 3 weeks into shooting, the pandemic hits, everything closes down, it's a mess. But the inspiration for making this stock was really, I grew up like being like a food nerd, like we would gather around a sofa, we would watch Food Network, and like there's a lot of that kind of stuff. My family's huge into food, as I'm sure a lot of yours are. But as a journalist and filmmaker, I see like mostly cis white straight men who are in the film industry making stories about other cis white straight men making food, and I think for me food is such an integral and like close part of my identity that I really wanted to see myself in that space of food storytelling. So it was like end of 2019 where I started looking for subjects to follow, and then met this couple who left Michelin star restaurants to start their own thing. They wanted to popularize Filipino food, do something that was accessible, not fine dining. And literally after they agreed, after a month, COVID hit. And so the documentary totally took like a huge swerve into a whole other direction, which really touches on the business side of things, which I kind of heard you talking about with businesses closing in Toronto and stuff. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey, but yeah, I'm glad to be here.
And Joelle had to step away just for a moment. So if you wouldn't mind, Law, sharing maybe about some inspiration behind your project until she can come back with us.
You're asking me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just listen to you guys talk about sort of food as like a big inspiration behind your lives and your filmmaking and documentaries in the same way that is for me. I think a lot of it was inspired by the recent pandemic. I did a whole documentary series about friends as restaurants in New York City. A friend owned a Taiwanese restaurant, had to shut down, try to find a way to sort of like reopen or, stay afloat. And they ended up donating food to hospitals and whatnot. So I did this whole doc series about Asian restaurants in New York, which was hit very early in the pandemic and particularly hard because they're Asian restaurants, and wanted to follow that up with a bit more of a narrative sort of approach, and found this kind of random Reddit thread of a screenshot of a customer who had ordered Chinese food and then decided not to pick it up because they were afraid of contracting the virus, and turned that into sort of the core of this kind of fictionalized version of reality about, a sort of family-run restaurant that is doing whatever it can or needs to sort of survive. And in the same way, sort of living within the New York City Chinatown world and seeing other restaurants close. And what do? You have to try to do anything you can. So.
Yeah, for me, Kodo the Last Service is a documentary following the last days of service of a family-run Japanese restaurant in Campbell River, which is a small fishing town on the coast of Vancouver. And we filmed in 2019, so pre-pandemic. The family, the son, Kenji Maeda, were good friends, and his family had announced that they were going to close after 40 years of in operation. And there was this outpouring from the community that when he shared the announcement on Facebook, people were sharing memories and photos from like the 80s. And that family really introduced raw fish sushi to this community that's mostly Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And Kenji, he had always wanted to make a film about this family restaurant. And now with the days coming that it was going to close, it was now or never. And so it was really as a favor that he asked me and my colleague, Milena Salazar, who is the cinematographer, to just come down and document the last days of service. And there was no other plan, really, just to have like a family record. And over the course of like 3 meal services, interviewing 24 community members, people who came through the restaurant over the 40 years, we found that there is something really special about this place. Not only like kind of the intercultural exchange, but it was just so wholesome. I think for me, I was coming in with my own experiences with racism, being in the city, and I was trying to project this kind of narrative on the Maeda and their experience. And that was not their story. So I wanted to be authentic to that. So they closed in May 2019. And we sat on that footage, and really, we were going to start kind of going through the material in the beginning of 2020 when the pandemic hit, and we're like, let's just put pause on this and attend to more urgent matters. And it wasn't until like the spring of 2020 when there was an increase in anti-Asian attacks and violence that I started to feel kind of distressed and also helpless, and thinking about, as my kind of role as an artist, as a filmmaker, what I could do in this kind of climate. And it made me remember like, oh, I have this beautiful, heartening, material that restores faith in our humanity. And that's when I decided to apply for finishing grants to complete the film with that kind of lens. It's not political in that sense, but just in its subtlety, how the community really embraced this immigrant Japanese family. There's also another kind of narrative thread of like, how do we say goodbye to businesses and to people, loved ones? And I think that's kind of a common theme in this panel in all of our films. And I wanted the film and the family have really modeled how to do that with grace and integrity.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing about kind of where the roots of your project are coming from. And I think a lot of you got into sort of the next question already, which is really thinking about food is more than just food. It's relationships, livelihoods, forging communities. And at this moment, I think it's really hard to extricate food from COVID, whether it's on the restaurant side of things or even being isolated from your family. It's a lifeline to stay connected. And so thinking about where viewers are right now, kind of in this intersecting moment with food, COVID, maybe facing isolation, maybe what's something that you would like the viewers to take away, in our current moment now? And feel free to build on any of the things you've all mentioned. I think it's very much leading into, this topic.
I can actually start on that. I think that a lot of you have made, wonderful documentary films about, restaurants that are, trying to stay alive and trying not to shut down and whatnot. I think one of the big things that, in terms of like my relationship with food and why I made this film was just a look into just how difficult it is to keep a business like that open. I'd done stuff before on delivery people and how hard that job is, and sort of these invisible, sort of silent people getting food to your door during the pandemic and whatnot. But also people, in the kitchen trying to make that food, and how much support we need to give them during this time as well. So it was really like a look into, and especially for all of us, when we're sort of locked in, you order that food, it just sort of arrives at your door, and you just open it and eat it. You don't really think about what goes on behind the scenes to get it there and to make it. So really just delving in and looking at the human stories of families and people trying to make that food for you, and supporting them was sort of the core of it seems like a lot of our films that we had made.
I can go next. So one thing that I learned while I was making the film, and one thing that I was hoping to inspire the audience to do, was to delve into their own family history. Because as I was making the film, I was talking to my crew members, to other people, and everyone agreed that they had family recipes that had been passed down through generations. They had stories that were being told through these dishes that meant a lot to them. And it struck me that, like, no matter which part of the world you're from, that's a shared experience. So, like, everyone has that. And so we may or may not be aware of that, and I came to realize that very recently. But I wanted to encourage people to go out and look into their own history, and to find the dishes that have been passed down from like great grandparents and whatnot, and just kind of learn what goes into making these recipes so near and dear to us, and how you might be able to like preserve them for future generations. Because I know it's really hard to keep certain traditions alive when you move from your homeland to other places. So it's really important to just kind of keep those memories close. And that was something that I really wanted to help people understand.
I love what you said about keeping traditions alive and how that's so hard, like from one place to another, especially if you're used to things being a certain way and now you're in a totally different culture or neighborhood or society that expects different things of food or of people. And I was just thinking about, like, when you said that, there's in 100 Joys, one of the business owners says that we're always evolving. The new generation, he hopes, is always going to be better than the one before, and that we can only hope that. But in that way, he's had to change some of his recipes too. Like, he's been making barbecue meats a certain way. He was trained in China and then moved here and made it a certain way, but in order to keep up with his customers' needs and like tailor the taste to his regular customers also. And they've been doing pretty well in COVID as well, with deliveries. He had to change the taste a little bit, and sometimes that's how it goes, and it doesn't make anything any less authentic or representative of what their food is. It's just the evolution of things. And something that I guess, to answer your question, about what I hope people take away from this is that, we started looking into this film because we were thinking about sidewalks and city sidewalks and how it sort of connects, and it creates a neighborhood and a place for people to connect with each other. And, Chinatown, at least in Toronto, being a place where the food spills out onto the streets, the fruits, the vegetables are placed outside of the supermarket, and people's stores extend outwards and then also inwards. And part of that evolution of the neighborhood too is that, you know, with new immigrants moving in and previous people moving out, it's always a place of change, and change is something that we are scared of sometimes because we lose things in the past, but also change can also be good, and we can look forward to good change. You know, places like Wong's Ice Cream, as I mentioned earlier, are technically newcomers to the community, but, you know, going back to tradition and food, and it's sort of about respecting the culture of the neighborhood while also, you know, bringing a new taste or a new twist to things, you know, making ice cream, but Asian inspired ice cream. So I think that there's, you know, I hope that people are, when they watch the film, they take away a little bit of optimism about change, that, you know, COVID has done a lot of harm, but also, you know, change sometimes is inevitable. And that's how these, you know, these places of Chinatowns have come to be, and how they even came to be in the first place was because, you know, they were forced to change. And so maybe with change, there's also that bit of sadness, but also something that we can look forward to in the future of how we can change as a community and how we can support this change to be good change in the future.
And I really resonate with that a lot. Not only change, but I think in terms of Kodo, the last service, the family and the community are really confronted with endings, things ending. And Kenji Maeda, he is also an arts consultant. And something that he says a lot to organizations and businesses is that kind of changing this paradigm that, you know, businesses shouldn't and don't need to last forever. And there is a correlation to just our mortality. We are experiencing a lot of loss and grief, especially during this time. So I think the family, not only, like I said, modeled how to say goodbye, giving time and space, and also expressing to the people who are closest to us, and also just people in our community, how much they mean to us. What was striking for me was, you know, me being an outsider, being able to ask the community members, people who are closest to the family, what the restaurant and the family meant to them. I feel like people were able to open up more, and maybe they would not have said those things directly to the family. And so for the family, that was the first time for them to hear these like really heartwarming, thoughtful sentiments. And Kenji and I have been reflecting on this, and we've kind of concluded like we shouldn't wait until the very last moment when someone or business is closing to share those things, that we should take that opportunity, even in our own communities, like the coffee shop that you go to every day, to really get to know who are the people behind the counter, and, you know, any opportunity that you can express gratitude, like do it now than until waiting, you know, decades later when they have to close. So that was something that I wanted audiences to take away from this, that that kind of community building aspect, and not being afraid to like, you know, reach out or get to know the people who are, you know, bring a little bit of joy every day into our lives.
Yeah, I love what you said about not waiting. And I think there's something about filmmaking that affords us and our subjects this like beautiful space to pause and like reflect, you know, in ways that they would never do unless maybe they go to therapy every week. But like chefs aren't going to therapy every week. So I remember there were moments in the filmmaking process where we would sit down for an interview and it's like COVID has thrown like literally everything at them, where it's like takeout only, no dine-in. Oh, dine-in's open again. Oh, actually it's not. And they just sat down and it was like, whew, you know, like this is like the 1 hour that we would never have to reflect on what's actually been going on. So I think, yeah, I just wanted to make a note that that's such a wonderful thing about filmmaking, that it gives us that space. In regards to the question about what I wanted viewers to take away, I think it was two big things that I've heard in a lot of other people's answers. One, Amanda, you mentioned this idea of like evolving generations. And I think that's something that's really interesting about the restaurant, Kasama, where Tim, the chef, is Filipino, but he's not looking to offer food that like is like his mom's food. He wants to offer like his take on his mom's food in a sense. And I think that's like kind of like the next generation coming up with how they see as their food, you know, which to me is really interesting because we haven't had a lot of coverage on that. We have a lot of like chef stories on like the older generation and like what quote unquote authentic Asian food is, whatever that even means. So I'm really excited to see people I guess experience this storytelling in a different way. And then two, I think with the theme of change is what we've always been talking about. The 1 year of filming during the pandemic was just like nuts. Like no one knew what was going to happen. No one knew when it was going to be over. The ending was supposed to be when COVID was over, but obviously that wasn't it. But I think what I really admired about Tim and Jeannie, both of the chef owners, was that they persevered the whole way. And they were like, we're going to do this no matter what. Like hospitality and food is our thing. And it's worth trying than like not trying at all. And I think that was something that was really inspiring to me, especially getting a front row seat into like literally how much change they had to go through, how much money they had to spend. Yeah, so I hope the viewers watch it and realize that like it is worth it. You know, as cheesy as it sounds, it is worth it to take the risk than to just like live your whole life not knowing what it would have been like. But yeah, I hope a lot of Asian Americans also are able to watch and see themselves that, you know, it's not like token minority chefs on a white dominated show, but really like these are people, you know, they're humans and they're business owners and they're chefs and they're Asian American. So yeah.
And then Jennifer, did you want to speak a little bit about what you want your viewers to take away? And if not, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just so immersed in everyone's like
no,
responses.
of course.
I feel like my film's a bit less serious, but I definitely think like something I want the audience to take away from my film is I hope it, you know, brought them some joy thinking about any little experiences that they've had with their parents or grandparents growing up. And yeah.
And, you know, I feel like I definitely had a sense of being reminded of my family. And even though the film itself tonally is different, it definitely brings a lot of the same themes and topics we're talking about, sort of those human connections that we have through food. And I know that we're coming to the end of our time today. So my very last question will be just something quick, maybe even addressing your filmmaking practice or like the production aspect. But just what is a piece of advice you would give emerging filmmakers, maybe especially an emerging Asian American filmmaker?
I can just go first. So one of the biggest things that I had problems with, this was my first film. So just I had so many ideas and I didn't know how to how to put them into one film. So there was a lot of going back and forth. And because I was the one also writing the story and everything, like it was up to me to make all these final decisions, but I didn't know how to make them. So some really good feedback I got was one of my professors asked me to think about what I wanted the audience to do once my film was over. And I told them that I wanted them to go and call their parents after the film was done and just, you know, say, you know, I love you. And that was kind of the emotional core of my film. And so it was easier to kind of start making decisions once I realized the story I want to tell is about how food brings family together and how even though there may be distance, you know, just having this experience, having this memory can kind of bridge that gap. And then after that, you know, things become a little bit easier. So I think it's really important to just kind of know, and it's easy to forget as you get more ideas and you get involved in the creative process. It's easy to forget why you're making the film to begin with. So I think it's really just important to like, you know, write it on a sticky note and stick it on your laptop while you're working. Just something to center yourself.
I think one of the advice I would give to young filmmakers is don't forget that 50% of the film experience is sound, and it's what you hear. So really take advantage of that. So if you ever feel like, for my film, I was on a tight deadline, and I had a time limit for the film itself. So I had to kind of come up with ways to fill in, like, I guess, plot holes through sound. So like, instead of, I think the original version of my film, it would zoom into the watermelon and you could see the seeds like fighting each other in one of them, and then the other one, they were like all peaceful and harmonious. But that took too much time, and the film time limit was 15 seconds without the credits and title scene. So 15 seconds, I can't do all of that. So in the end, I decided to go with sound to show what was happening inside the watermelons. So yeah, don't forget that. And I would also say, always nail your animatic or your Leica reel, so that when you, because no matter how much fancy compositing or animation you add on top of your film, it's not going to read well if your story doesn't read at its most basic level. So that being the storyboards, the animatic, and yeah, so that's my tip.
I think I'll share something which is kind of evident from everybody here, which is, tell a story that you care deeply about, and your voice will come through, and the voices of your characters will come through, and the audience will, get a deeper insight into why you care about the story and why it's important for people to see it. And in terms of the other advice I give and receive a lot is simply just go do it. A lot of the obstacles and barriers to making anything is your willingness to go out and make something. And it's very difficult, as we all know, to go make something. And it's even harder to put it together and to share it with the world. But it's the only way that these stories can be told. And you can know if you are capable of telling these stories is to go and tell them.
I think what came to mind was pretty similar to what you just shared. This idea that like you matter as a director, that your voice and who you are, your identity, your perspective, like all of that matters. And I think it's really cool to see it come to life in this conversation, that like how we all look at things is also so personal, that like comes from our own background, our own cultural lens. And I think that's so valuable. I would love to see so many more types of filmmakers behind the camera. Your crew matters. I think that's really huge for me, hiring the right people for the story. So yeah, just remember that your voice matters, I guess, is what came to mind.
I think I have two takeaways or two pieces of advice. I think first for me, especially for documentary filmmaking and interviewing, something for me that I have to remind myself always is to be open and to be curious, especially for when I'm going into an environment that I'm an outsider in and I'm bringing all of my own experiences and biases into this space, that I remain kind of curious about the people that I'm interviewing and not projecting my own kind of story. So kind of, I hope it generates like empathy and compassion for their point of view and their life experience. The other thing too is that I think, especially when we're in this social political climate, that we're really thinking of that our identity of our different ethnic backgrounds, that for me, I have to remind myself, I'm also an artist, and that is also an identity in and of itself. And that has to show, or it comes through in our work, in our artwork. So for me, what I wanted to challenge myself with this film is that, like, yes, I want to think about the themes, about endings, and how to do that with grace and integrity, but how am I going to show that on the screen? And so for me, the aesthetics choice of like having long static frames, shots would also model that. So I was really confronted with like, okay, we have this like really beautiful, heartening subject matter and theme, but how does that come off I'm like, this is a visual medium. So how can we say that in those aesthetic choices as well? So not to just kind of think of our identity in all of those facets.
My advice for emerging filmmakers is to do everything that everyone said. I was like, okay, I'm gonna talk about this. Oh, this is everything here is like exactly what I think is like great advice for any first or emerging filmmaker. I will just add on to what everyone else said a little bit about funding. Because I think a lot of emerging filmmakers, at least for me anyways, that was the barrier to making the film. And it's so important to believe in your film and to have to put your heart into the film. But unless you know, we have the support that we need to make these amazing stories, it's very hard on our wallets and our crew also to make these. And so you know, I've done it both ways, where, you know, I've tried to fund films myself, and then I've also applied to grants. And I think in Canada here we have a really great grant system and organizations. So I would say try to get plugged in as much as possible to your local, you know, arts organizations, all the different, whether you're part of a specific group, whether it's an Asian film festival, Asian organizations, whether you're part of the queer community, join those community groups and organizations, see what funds are out there, because it's actually amazing all the funds that were available that I never knew about before I got plugged into the community. So community is so important. Talk to your friends, talk to other artists, support each other, and then, you know, these films, you will find avenues and people that you meet who are willing to support these films. And I'm not sure what it's like in the US either, but I have heard from other filmmakers that there are private organizations that do help with funding things, lending nonprofit status, for example, to your film. So I think, you know, it sounds, you know, like it's this thing that, you know, you want to believe in your film and the story and all, and that it all is, but, you know, you want to have the best funding, the best support, the best people behind you, and to make this film the best that you can be, to get good equipment, to make your life easier, and so that you're not eating instant ramen all the time because you have no money because you're funding this film. And trust me, I've been there. So like, I think just get plugged into the community, support each other, and keep your ear out for grants and opportunities and things, and pitch like mad, like just keep pitching, and one of those pitches will go through like 100 joys. So good luck. And I think it's awesome that we're, you know, putting out we're able to make all these stories out there. All of us here are like shorts filmmakers. I don't know how all of you funded your films, but I feel like I know Joella mentioned that they got a grant. So, you know, this is I think a good way that we can kind of get our foot in there. So good luck.
I mean, I feel like that's a perfect way to end this program. And I just wanted to thank everyone for dedicating all your time to fostering, you know, the Asian American filmmaking community in Seattle with not only your films, but also sharing and being vulnerable and being insightful in this whole Q&A. So thank you all so much. And I'll just close out our time together here by saying thank you to the audience for joining the 10th Seattle Asian American Film Festival. Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support for the festival and our community. If you have not done so already, please take a moment to fill out our festival participant survey. There's a link in your confirmation email. Data from the survey helps us get grants and sponsorships, and it's another way to help support SAAFF, and check out our other programs at seattleaaff.org. Tickets are still available. On behalf of the entire festival, thank you so much.